Hello and welcome to Berlin, just days ahead of a general election which will decide the makeup of a new parliament here in the Bundestag behind me and of course of a new government. Well, I'm joined now by the Financial Times Berlin bureau chief, Bertrand Benoit. Tell me first of all, Bertrand, what do you expect from this election at the weekend?
Well, there's one thing that we can say pretty much for sure. It's that Angela Merkel is very likely to become the next chancellor, to get a second term as chancellor. The big question really is not so much that, but is what kind of a government she will head. And there are various coalitions that are in place. So explain a little bit about that. She's been in a grand coalition, at the head of a grand coalition for the past parliament. What could happen this time? Well, theoretically and mathematically, there can be many different combinations involving two parties, three parties. But I think the political reality now is that we're looking at two options mainly, each of which has a 50% chance just about to become true. One is what Merkel really wants and what she's been already fighting at the last election, which is a coalition of a Christian Democratic Union, the Conservative Party, with the liberal FDP, much smaller party. The other alternative would be a continuation of what's happened so far in the past 4 years, which is the Grand Coalition again.
So it's 50-50 between those two choices. What would be the impact on policy if, for example, it were to change and go to the black-yellow, so this is the CDU and the FDP?
Well, there's not a very sharp contrast in terms of policy between the two options, but the alternatives become a bit clearer, especially now in the last days of the campaign. The government that Merkel is fighting for would go ahead with pretty large tax cuts, even though they would be spread across the 4 years of the government. With the SPD, the differences are much more. So you'll find that the consensus is much smaller, and you might have a more conservative kind of government in the sense that they won't do big steps like big tax cuts. They will probably focus a bit more on cleaning up the budget and making sure the debt, which is getting very high, comes lower very fast.
But probably be a little bit more relaxed about a fiscal deficit in the interim. What does all this mean for the EU's for Germany's neighbours within the EU?
Well, I guess the main question for Germany's neighbours in the EU and for the world really, given the size of the German economy, is how well it performs. Now, Merkel has a clear theory about that. She says the budget is not really the priority right now, or at least there's not very much we can do about it. So what we should do is make sure that our economy is very vigorous and starts growing again very fast, hence the tax cuts. Really, I guess we'll have to see how this turns out, but I think the interest that the other countries, the neighbouring countries, will have is that Germany gets back on its feet very fast.
Now, you're a veteran of a number of campaigns here in Germany. This one, it has to be said, hasn't really set the world alight with excitement. Why is that? Why do you think it's seeming to be such a muted campaign in comparison?
Well, there's a good reason for that, which is why a lot of people fear another grand coalition. Basically, we have now the two biggest parties, the main political opponents that have dominated the political stage for the last decades, have been ruling together. So you have the Chancellor, who's campaigning against the Vice-Chancellor, and they can't really attack each other very hard because they share the same track records. They've made the decisions together, but also because they might have to work together in the future, and so they can't really go at each other's throat.
It's a shame, but we'll look forward to what happens on Monday when the dust settles. Plenty more coming to you from Berlin this week.